it isn't always I understand it here, but there's a movement, something happens. And one question I have is that I remember a few months ago asking you when you first realised that you were self-realised, and you told me a story of something that happened in Bombay about 10-12 years ago when you were sick for 7 days, and after that you realised that something had happened. And recently when I've heard you talk, you've said that something happened comparatively recently, like the last few months. And I know there's different stages in realisation. I'm just interested to know, if you like, where you are now and how you see the different stages that have happened to you.
No words come to the reply. What I'm feeling now is another sense of vibration in my body. And this is the first day for a long time where I didn't do anything. I just woke up naturally and Kiala was gone. So I had the whole day to myself. And I'm not very here. So what usually happens when somebody asks, the other thing is, as I'm talking, I've got an echo of my own voice, about 3 echoes. When somebody asks a question, a reply is presented. Talking several. You talked about the 7 days in Bombay, and then a series of replies came to that. And then you talked about something else and a series of replies. They've all gone. So they came and they went. What happened in India was I almost died. I had a very high temperature. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't really go to a doctor, and I didn't know anybody at that time around who had money. And I never go to a doctor unless I really have to anyway. And I was quite enjoying what was happening. What was happening was I had a very high fever, and I was hallucinating, or what could be called hallucinating, and I was going in and out of dimensions, but I just thought I'd got a fever and I was hallucinating. And then when that had gone after 7 days, I'm just seeing things about it now. Somebody told me that Ishtar was going to Thailand, and when I heard that, there was a discord in me, which meant to me there's something not harmonious about it. So I looked at that to see what that was, and then a whole story unfolded about that. The story goes like this. At present you are locked in an illusion. You think you're this body and this mind and these emotions. You think that this is you, that this is you, and you think that this is what you think it is, and it isn't, and you're locked into it. And you're locked into it because you came here to experiment with this dimension, but you got caught in it. and you're going round and round on the wheel, dying, coming back, creating karma, dying, coming back to fix it, and round and round. Now you're not who you think you are, but you're locked into thinking who you think you are. Now to get out of that, some pop is needed. Something needs to happen. You can't just gently think your way out. You can't think that you know what I'm saying and then think your realization and then be out. It doesn't work like that. You have to pop out of the dimension you're in. So this all came back to Ishtar. Ishtar going to Thailand with her boyfriend, discord, and I said she's escaping. Now, what's needed to get you to pop out of your illusion is tremendous pressure. Tremendous pressure. And the system you're in, the body you're in, doesn't want that. This system wants to survive. It has a built-in program to survive. And every time it gets uncomfortable, it says, put me right. That's why when you bang your shin, you get a lot of pain. Your system is saying, take care of that, it might be broken. When you get too cold or too hot, too damp or too dry, your system says, this is too much. You need to put it right. So when you get a lot of pressure, you say, I must undo this pressure. Now there are certain pains and there are certain pressures that you do need to put right, because that's to do with the system. But there's another level of energy in you that has to build and build and build. And it'll take you to a most uncomfortable place. And you have to stay there and stay there. And then as I was talking about this, I saw something about this energy, and again it's to do with Ishtar, is this energy has to be built to a tremendous pressure, but it has to be streamed, it has to be in line, it has to be smooth. If it starts to think too much, or think this is right or this is wrong, it starts to disturb the energy, and it becomes itself, and it becomes a chaos, and that won't do it. You won't pop through that sort of chaos. You have to have a tremendous pressure inside. If you lose your bag with all your belongings in, that's an opportunity. That's pressure. If you lose your wallet, if the market crashes and you lose your money, if your partner dies, if you have a car crash, if something tragic happens to you, there's an opportunity, providing you're conscious and with it and stream it. If you go into a sort of chaos, then the energy does this and it won't move. If you're there and say, what is it? If you're present, it starts to stream. And the more pressure there is in there, the more you're likely to pop through to another level of consciousness. So those 7 days were a pressure, and something in me knew not to do anything about it. So I stayed with it and stayed with it till I was on the edge of dying. I saw the door. And I didn't know that then, I know that now, looking back in retrospect. I know I could have gone through the door and I'd have been out of this dimension. But I know I didn't come to go away, I came to be here. So there was a change. That's when I popped through. But I didn't realize I'd popped through. That's when I'd broken the film, but I didn't know and then it took time to realize that just to allow that in. And it's still happening. It's happening day by day. different levels of that realization is happening.
So, is there basically one pop that is significant, and is everything else then levels on top of that pop?
Well, that pop is a place where you can't go back. I realized that, and again, all this is in retrospect, and that's why it's important that there are people like me that will talk, and people like the team who will share their experiences, is just to encourage you. Because when it's happened, there's no motivation for anything. If the body gets hungry, then you respond to it. If you get cold, you respond to it. But there's nothing in there that wants to do anything anymore. And so most people who get realized, they just fade away. And then a few people, just a few, decide to share that. Sharing won't help you realize that place yourself, but it'll encourage you to go on looking. What was your question again?
Well, in a way you have answered it, was because the question was originally you talked about 7 days in Bombay as the time you popped through, and then when you've been talking more recently, you said
right.
A realization happened completely recently.
All right.
So in a way you have answered it.
Right, but there's another level to that. There is a point where you cannot be unaware again. Whatever you do, you will be aware. You can't move a finger and not know about it. You hear every leaf. You hear the sound inside the mouth, the sound inside the head, the heartbeat, the digestion. And I'm not talking about anything esoteric. I'm not talking about anything magic. It's just that you can all hear these things too. You can hear the leaves out there, but you might be concentrating too much on what I'm saying, and you don't include those leaves. There's a hum from a machine over here somewhere, and you may not hear that. When you've gone past that place, you hear, you smell, you taste, you include all these things, and you cannot not do that. There is a place when you cannot be unaware again.
I'm really interested in this thing about the pressure, because I know for me there's no going back. I know there's no going back, and yet I don't feel under pressure, yet I don't feel I'm escaping. It's like, I guess I'm somewhere in between the two. And I know you've talked before about often there's such tremendous pressure when someone pops through, it's too much for the body, and you've explained that's because the body wasn't prepared. So I guess there's degrees of drama popping, if you like, to simplify it.
Well, although I'm not doing this anymore, what's happened while you've been around me is I've been preparing you all for that. And with my energy, I've been supporting you through different levels. And so with most of you that have listened and tuned in, you'll slide in and you won't even know you're there. And that's because you've been around this energy that's vibrating at that level, and it's affecting you the whole time. So many of the difficult levels you're already through. And then what's taking you through comparatively easy is your intent, is your focus. Your intent is on the highest. And so you're going there. The only thing you could look at now is when you come to these places in yourself, when you get angry, and then you judge yourself for being angry, you're missing a pressure point. At the moment you're angry, you're giving yourself a gift. You're feeding some pressure there. And then you judge your anger, or you say, I shouldn't be like that, or I don't want to be like this. And then you're trying to escape something that's there, and you need to be with it. Because nothing is incidental, nothing is wrong. Everything is happening because it needs to happen. And so when you go into these places, instead of thinking I'm wrong or I've missed or I'm not there yet, say I'm here now. and this is my reality. And by including that, it'll help your alchemy. And the word becomes, the sting has been taken out of your tail, which means when you are angry, you are so aware of it and so sincere about it, you're not destructive anymore to yourself or to anybody. If you just accept it, it'll just be one of your stepping stones.
Another question I want to ask you, which is a little esoteric, but I still want to ask it. You talk a lot about, not a lot, but sometimes you talk about people becoming invisible and walking through walls, and how this in a way is a normal state of being, and how in what we call the future, this kind of thing is going to happen more and more. And I'm just wondering for you whether there's an attraction to do that kind of thing, whether it ever comes up you'd like to experiment with doing these kind of things.
It's just the opposite. First of all, it's not esoteric. Esoteric means something magical and something produced unnaturally. And what we call magic is just somebody who knows the rules, who knows the laws, and just uses them. And there are people with ill intent that do that, and then it becomes dark. And there are people on the edge of the light that do that, and then it becomes lighter. But usually by somebody who is realized they don't do that. They don't interfere with things. Not that that doesn't happen around them, but they don't do that. So when you say whether I feel like doing that, remember, whenever I've heard anybody can do something, I wanted to know whether this can do it. So just watching people in sports and doing various things, looking at it, and then I've looked and say, do I want to do that? So I've done many, many things to find out whether I can do that. And then came a certain point where I knew whether this system was fine enough or trained enough to do that. Physical things. So then I either did them or I didn't do them according to that. And then came a point where I started to do the same thing on the inside. What can be done and what can't be done. Can minds be read? Can you see into the future or into another part, and all these things? And then my alignment has always been to do with helping people. So the games of that dropped away. And then what it became was, when somebody was sitting in front of me, what is the maximum that this system can do for this being? And so I got to the place where I could see past lives, and I could see what their childhood was like, and know what they were feeling physically, emotionally, mentally, where I could become inside the person. And again, you see, this isn't esoteric, it isn't special. All of you can do that. It would be like if somebody sat here and played classical guitar very beautifully, and you'd say, I want to do that. Let's say they're a concert guitarist. You could do that, but you'd have to do a lot of practice. And if you hadn't got an aptitude towards it, if you weren't born with a natural talent, you'd have to work very, very hard. If you were born with a natural talent, you'd still have to practice 8 hours a day, but you could do it. So what I'm talking about isn't out of any of your scope. If you want to know what people are thinking, read their minds, you can do that. It just, you have to devote yourself to it. Now, I didn't decide I wanted to know what people were thinking. I decided I wanted to be as efficient as possible, helping the person I was working with. So all these things developed. And so if I heard that somebody like John Parakis, for instance, could look at a naked body and decide their traumas by looking at them, I wanted to do that. If Ida Rolf could put the hand in to the body and release tensions, I wanted to do that. So I did all these things. And then came a certain point where this awakening happened, but I can't remember exactly when. This awakening happened, and then I'm completely blank about it. I don't see anything about it. I stopped using these facilities. In some way it was an imposition, but I wasn't very worried about that, because we're all responsible for ourselves. But somewhere I saw that helping people doesn't help people. It helps to make you lazy. All problems are bullshit. A problem is a problem because you have taken a fact and you want it to be a problem. Your life right now is exactly the way you want it to be, right now. If you have money, that's what you want. If you don't have money, that's what you want. If you're hassled in a relationship, that's what you want. If you don't have a relationship, that's what you want. On levels and levels and levels I'm talking about, you are right now exactly the way you want to be. And if you want to be any different, you can be different. Now, if you want to be able to walk through this wall, you can do it. You've got to work at it, you've got to practice at it. And this is what happens, is the moment you reach a then vibration, fine vibration, that allows you to release the holding of your molecules so that you can pass through something else that's said to be solid. The moment you've attained such a level, that's a very high level of purity. And at the moment you do that, then it's ridiculous to walk through walls when there are doorways. What happens is when you take your vibration to that level, you wake up, and then when you wake up, you don't bother with those things. The only reason you'd possibly bother with those things is if it would help other people to wake up. Because at the moment of awakening, there's great joy and there's great sadness. The great joy is you're free. And this is how I view this, is it's freedom. You are now free. You know you are not born, and you know you will never die. You are, you always have been, and you always will be. So you're free. Nothing can go wrong, and nothing can go right. Everything is exactly the way it is. You know that. But at the same time, the sadness comes is, you look around and you see all these people, they are also in that state, but they don't know it. And then the sadness comes is, again, it's very, saying it isn't saying it. This is the closest I can get to. You are not other people. You are me. You are me. You are me, and I am you. And all separation is illusion. All separation is an attitude. We're all one. So I'm free. But this part of me isn't free. I'm totally free, and at the same time, this part of me isn't free. And so, what many people do, what most people do when they're realized, they just decide to wait, because everybody's going to be free. And once you reach this place, there's no time, so you're not waiting. No, I know none of this makes sense. And then certain people like me and many of the team and many of you in your development over lives, in your path, when you reached a certain stage, which is this magical fifth again, which again I don't really know what it means, but we call it the fifth, you planted a grain of sand. You planted a discord on that level. You created something that wasn't harmonious on the fifth level. And then you continue to your realization. Now, if you continue to your realization in absolute purity, then you disappear from this dimension. And then you can wander around here like there are billions of entities wandering around here saying, wake up, just wake up. It's easy. All you've got to do is let go. They're all moving around trying to say this, but you can't hear them because you're in this dimension. So they pick on some poor channel. And so a perfectly beautiful person is sitting there and suddenly they go, and this entity that was floating around is trying to manipulate this body from another dimension, and it all looks very ugly and it's not very effective. So what many people have done, and especially at this time, that's why they've come back, they planted this disharmony at a certain level, so that when they reached this absolute purity, they still had a place to come back to. They could anchor themselves back into this place. And so I think in the East traditionally it's called anchoring the fifth or something like that, so they can get back and still function on this level. What we're going to do this time, many of us, many of you if you want it, is we're going to take this a stage further than it's ever been before, where you will be able to disappear and produce things, and some people might do that, some people might not. But you're going to be able to bring through all the levels of consciousness into this level. Many people that become realized don't really realize they're realized. They know something's happened, they know something's free, but they don't really know what it is. Becoming realized doesn't give you all these cities, these powers, these ways of disappearing or walking through walls or manifesting things. Those are things that Tantra especially worked on those things. It was more important than their realization was the powers, the cities. So many of them produce these things, and that's when they get used darkly. I'll explain that because I've been reading some books lately about people that got lost. Reaching the space of absolute purity is quite dangerous because you can disappear from this dimension, which is not dangerous by higher dimensions, but it's dangerous by this die. You can die. Most people don't do that. They go to a certain level and pull back. I heard that some people left this group. They might think they left for this reason and that reason. What they probably left for was their system sensed the possibility of what can happen here, things beyond the mind. So they ran away with their fear. Many people reach the threshold and pull back. Some people develop these powers before their freedom. Some people have their freedom and then start to develop these powers. If you develop the powers after freedom, you only use them for the light. If you develop them before, the temptation is to use them for self-gain, which brings a lot of karma, but also sometimes to help people. So a person can become in a very high state of vibration, but they're not in their freedom. And of course, you can't tell that because they look as though they're free. And they have powers. And then what happens is somebody comes in front of them and says, I'm stuck in this, I'm stuck in... And there's a great temptation to say, I'll just help this person. So what they do is they do something. If nobody sees what happens, they do something with their energy which can help this person. Now as soon as they've done that, they've created an imbalance. And when you've done it once, and of course it works when you've developed these powers, especially when you're very close to the crystallization, then you get a temptation to go on doing it. And as you do it, you make an imbalance. And then that imbalance has to be paid for, not only by the person who creates it, but by the person that was helped. They have to pay too. There's an imbalance. And then these little insidious uses of energy start to build up, and before long the person's in the dark. They look as though they're working for the light, but they're not anymore. So what usually happens is, when a person reaches a place of absolute freedom, they don't use their powers. Not everybody who reaches their freedom is aware of their access to these powers. But when they do, they don't use them. Now, this isn't to say that amazing things don't happen around them. So they might be talking or sharing, and you feel the air different, or you feel you different, or you feel an ecstasy that you don't normally have on your own. You might see colors or see things differently. Many things happen around these people, but if they're in their freedom, they are not doing it. They are being. If it's done, it doesn't matter whether it's done for the light. It's dark. And it causes a repercussion. What was the question?
Well, you basically answered it. It was about, it was focused more on you and about whether you were interested in...
Right, okay. Now, what's happened to me is just the opposite. Is as I realize these things are possible, I keep away from them. As I realize that that I can know all things. That's what comes, and I was blocking saying it. I can know all things. I can know the future. I can know everything. I block that. And my theory about that is, if I was to allow that, then I wouldn't stay here. And as I keep reminding myself, and many psychics and channelers keep reminding me, I have a major role to play on the planet. And then we'll divert again, because this is what I've been playing with recently. And I don't have an answer yet. As I've reached this place of purity on these certain levels, my motivation is gone. And then I know, and I know through my meditation and the messages I get, that I'm to be one of the pivots for the change of consciousness. But there's no motivation in me to do anything. And if I were to do anything, then I would lose my purity. And so what I would doing might be very helpful, but it wouldn't be clear. And so what I'm playing with is just staying here doing nothing and only responding to situations. So at the moment, Roxy's a key in that, because so I just got some stuff. So that's the agreement that he and I made in another level, that he was not going there yet, because if he goes there, he'll become as motivationless as I am, and then so somewhere we made this agreement that he was going to stay back and stay in the light, stay blessed. He's blessed. I'll see if I can come back to that later on about being blessed. So, and he has to stay that side of it, because you'll lose your motivation. And you're the drive at the moment. You're what's moving it. You're what's moving the energy. And this will respond to that. The thing about blessed, what I got with you, and I can think of many people I know who haven't realized this, is many people are born on this planet with a certain energy. They're blessed with a very high rate of energy, and then they use this in their business, in their relationships, in power, in different ways, and things go very well for them to a certain point, and then they get ill. And this is happening with a lot of people in America. This strange illness that's coming along where people just collapse. And what this is probably about is that the energy that these blessed people were given by themselves in another dimension was not to be used solely for their own welfare. It was given to help the planet at this time. But they forgot that, they didn't wake up to that, so they have been misusing it. Even although they may not be doing anything unpleasant with the energy, they're misusing it for themselves, and it wasn't given for them. It was given to share. And so, in a way, the success of your business was a little bit like magic. It just, you worked hard, but it just came. It just came. And that was because you're blessed with this energy, and anything you do will work. And but then you knew that it was for something else. That's why you wanted to start a commune way back. You knew somewhere it was for something else. And then, as you told me, since you've been doing this work, you've hardly spent any time in your business, and it's doubled its value. And it's because you've now got your energy online and where it belongs now, what it's supposed to be doing.
When I spend this time with you, I start to get spaced out. Which actually, that's a question that is an interesting question for me. It seems to me there's two very different categories of being spaced out. There's like, I know sometimes when I'm spaced out, I'm basically in my thoughts and I'm not here. Now when you get spaced out, it seems to me obviously something totally different is happening. And I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about what happens when you get spaced out. I suspect you're going to say you're going nowhere.
Well, there are different levels. As you say, you often get spaced out. You were spaced out the other day when you were driving. I forget where we were driving from to.
Bristol to London.
Yes. You went out many times. Were you aware of that?
You went into the same car.
I know.
Yes, there's a few times, because there was a few times where I didn't check in the mirror to see if you were still in the car behind.
Yeah, but there was more than that. You were
that.
thinking quite hard about something a lot of the time.
I got really shocked by that accident. When we saw the really bad accident with the car overturned.
Okay.
It's true, I wasn't that aware of being spaced out, that's true.
Right. You were thinking quite hard. You see, when you drove behind us from somewhere to somewhere else, where was that? Munich to France. You were not spaced out, you were there.
Yeah.
And you were there, that last stage you were there the whole time. You didn't go. This time on this last journey you kept going in and out. And it was spaced out. Now this was functioning. If there had been an accident in front you'd have seen it, but it would have taken you a few milliseconds to get it. You'd have to get back in.
Right.
So that was because you were preoccupied. Now there's another level of spacing out where you're not focused on anything. And yet, if somebody walks into the room, you know they walked in. You'll probably know who it is too. But you're not focused on them. They are no more than the sound of the machine or the singing of the bird or the wind in the trees. But you're fully there. Not focused on anything. Not thinking. Although thoughts may go by, you're not thinking them. And then there is another level which is really when you are living so totally in another dimension that you've withdrawn all your presence from this one. You see, at the moment, you are all living in many dimensions. Now, there's one of you in another dimension, and you're all fully conscious of where you are, as well as being here. But this, at the moment, is your main anchor. It's the lowest vibration, it's the main anchor, it's where you need most of your energy, because you've come here to do something. And so most of you is here. But you're in these other dimensions as well. And if you sit and you allow, you'll start to become aware of these. Any other questions?
I don't have anything else to say, but I know Linda wanted to ask something. Would you like to come and sit here and ask something?
No, I think you've covered it. Thanks.
Okay.
Let's hear what's going on with you, if you've got any questions or any comments. See, what I realize I'm doing is I'm tuning into the speaker, and then you have to get it or not get it. I'm not tuning into you. And so you can't understand what I'm saying, because what I'm saying doesn't belong to the mind. It belongs to somewhere else.